Welcome back to another episode of True Horror Reflections, where we dive deep into tales that will make your skin crawl and your mind race. Tonight, we have a special treat for you, a trifecta of terror that will leave you questioning the world around you. Our first story, The Haunting Melody of Apartment 307, will take you into the mysterious sounds that haunt the night and penetrate your dreams. What would you do if a ghostly tune guided your life into a nightmarish reality? Next up, we venture into the unsettling realm of reflections in The Mirror in Room 12. Mirrors are supposed to show us who we are, but what happens when they reveal something, or someone, entirely different? Lastly, we'll delve into the unsettling events surrounding a vintage find in The Forgotten Camera. Sometimes a great deal is not as good as it seems, and some memories captured on film refuse to be forgotten. If you're new here or you just haven't gotten around to it yet, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an episode. And if you've had your own terrifying experiences and want to share them, don't hesitate to email us your stories at grimreflections67@gmail.com. We're always on the lookout for new tales to chill our audience to the bone. Now brace yourselves, turn off the lights, grab a comforting blanket, and let's dive into tonight's horrifying adventures. When Sarah moved into apartment 307, she couldn't have been more thrilled. The apartment was a quaint one-bedroom in a vintage building that screamed character. The wooden floors, the old-fashioned molding, and the tall, expansive windows were all things she fell in love with immediately. She felt like an adult, living on her own, in a place she could truly call her sanctuary. However, it didn't take long for her to notice something peculiar. Every night at midnight, a haunting melody would drift through her apartment. It was a complex tune, a mixture of beauty and sorrow that seemed to hang in the air long after the notes had ceased. It was as if the pianist was playing out their entire life story, with all its ups and downs, triumphs and tragedies. At first, Sarah shrugged it off as a musically inclined neighbor. But as days turned into weeks, the tune grew more intense. The melody began to seep into her dreams, and those dreams quickly turned into vivid, unsettling nightmares. Night after night, she would awaken in a cold sweat, her heart pounding as if she'd been running a marathon. Determined to get to the bottom of it, Sarah started by asking her neighbors if they knew anything about the mysterious melody. Each one denied any knowledge, adding to her growing suspicion that something unnatural was occurring. Even the building's landlord, a kind yet reticent older woman, seemed to become uneasy when Sarah described the tune, offering only that the previous tenant had abruptly moved out for reasons she wouldn't disclose. Sarah's curiosity shifted from a mere annoyance to a burning obsession. She felt an insatiable need to find the source of the melody that was wreaking havoc on her emotional well-being. So she made a plan. One night, at the stroke of midnight, she armed herself with her phone and a flashlight, cautiously stepping out into the dimly lit hallway. Guided only by the haunting notes of the melody, Sarah found herself being led to the building's basement. It was a place she had never ventured into before, marked private with faded lettering on a worn sign. She hesitated for a moment, contemplating the risks, but her obsession wouldn't allow her to turn back. With a trembling hand, she picked the lock and stepped inside. What she discovered there left her dumbstruck. A grand piano stood in the center of the room, surrounded by layers of dust and cobwebs that seemed to indicate years of abandonment. On the seat lay an ancient sheet of music, tattered and worn but still readable. Even more unsettling was the temperature. The room was freezing despite it being midsummer. Sarah approached the piano cautiously, her eyes scanning the musical notations on the sheet. They seemed to be written in a loop, as though the composition was designed to be never-ending. Just as she was about to leave, the unthinkable happened. The piano keys began to depress on their own, as if invisible hands were playing the haunting melody that had so consumed her life. Overcome with terror, Sarah ran. She bolted up the stairs, slammed her apartment door shut behind her, and began packing. By morning, she was gone, her keys left on the landlord's desk without explanation. After some digging, she discovered a horrifying fact. The apartment complex had been built over an old burial ground, and it was rumored that the spirits who rested there had a particular affinity for music. To this day, the haunting melody of apartment 307 continues to be heard by its occupants. It remains an enigmatic part of the building's lore, enchanting yet terrifying all who dare to listen. And Sarah, forever changed by her experience, still wakes up at midnight, half expecting to hear that haunting melody drift through her room. When I checked into the quaint bed and breakfast for a weekend getaway, room 12 seemed like any other. A queen-sized bed adorned with floral sheets, antique furniture, and an attached bathroom boasting vintage tiles. The room even had a fireplace, which the owner claimed was original to the 19th century house. But what caught my attention was the large, ornate mirror hanging on the wall opposite the bed. The frame was intricate, almost otherworldly, as if it held a story waiting to be told. The first night was uneventful, save for the occasional creaks and groans of the old house settling into its bones. However, as I prepared for bed, I felt an uncanny sensation that I was being watched. Shaking off the paranoia as a product of my imagination, I climbed into bed and turned off the lights. I woke up to the flickering of the fireplace. Disoriented, I checked the clock. It was exactly midnight. The room seemed darker than before, but what froze my blood was the reflection in the mirror. The glass showed the room in perfect detail, but I was missing from it. Intrigued, but also terrified, I hesitantly approached the mirror. As I got closer, my reflection appeared, but it was behind me, standing at the edge of the bed, looking directly into the mirror with a sinister smile. I spun around, heart pounding, but there was no one there. I looked back into the mirror, and there I was, in my expected place, appearing as shocked as I felt. Unnerved, I crawled back into bed, but sleep eluded me. I lay there for hours, watching the mirror, half expecting my reflection to make another sinister appearance. The next morning, I was exhausted. I considered packing my bags and leaving, but curiosity kept me rooted. I needed to know the story behind that mirror. The owner was a friendly older man named Edgar, who seemed to take great pride in the history of his establishment. Over breakfast, I cautiously asked him if anyone had ever mentioned strange occurrences in room 12. Edgar hesitated, his expression turning serious. "Well, you could say that room 12 is special," he began. "That mirror you're asking about belonged to the original owner of the house, Eleanor. She was known to be a bit of an eccentric, obsessed with occult practices, and claimed to possess the ability to communicate with the other side." According to Edgar, Eleanor had mysteriously disappeared, but her mirror remained, passed down through generations until it found its way back to this room. Guests often claimed to experience strange visions, but nobody had ever felt threatened, until now. That night, armed with this newfound knowledge, I returned to my room with a mix of trepidation and determination. Midnight struck again, and just like clockwork, the fireplace flickered to life. I stared at the mirror, waiting. Slowly, my reflection began to distort, morphing into a figure that looked like Eleanor, based on an old photograph Edgar had shown me. She appeared to be chanting, her eyes filled with a fiery intensity. Terrified but unable to look away, I watched as Eleanor's image faded, replaced by a swarm of shadowy figures behind me in the reflection. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew through the room, extinguishing the fireplace and plunging everything into darkness. When I turned on the lights, my reflection was back to normal, but the air felt heavier, as though I had disturbed something ancient. I left the bed and breakfast the next morning without saying goodbye to Edgar, convinced that whatever force resided in that mirror had sensed my fear. Whether it was Eleanor's spirit or something more sinister, I knew that I had escaped an encounter with something from the other side. To this day, the mystery of the mirror in room 12 remains an enigma, a haunting experience that I'll carry with me forever. When Emily bought the vintage camera from the local thrift store, she never anticipated the unsettling events that would follow. It was an old Nikon F3, well preserved, and the previous owner seemed eager to part with it for a meager price. A photography enthusiast, Emily couldn't resist such a bargain, and decided to use it for her next project, a series of nightscapes. The camera worked like a dream, capturing the starry sky and crescent moon with a richness that even her modern DSLR couldn't achieve. It wasn't until she got the film developed that she noticed something unusual. In the corner of each photograph was a blurry figure, almost ghostly, staring back at her. Intrigued but assuming it was a fault in the film, Emily decided to test the camera again. On her second outing, she chose a desolate beach, miles away from the city lights. Again, the camera performed exceptionally, and Emily felt a sense of satisfaction as she clicked away. However, that night, something changed. Just as she was about to pack up, she heard whispers carried by the wind, whispers that seemed to call her name. Startled, Emily quickly gathered her gear and rushed home. Once there, she wasted no time in getting the film developed. To her horror, the figure had grown more distinct. It now had discernible features, a face contorted in anguish, reaching out as if pleading for help. Petrified but unable to let go of her curiosity, Emily decided to investigate the camera's origins. She returned to the thrift store, only to find the owner uncooperative. He claimed to know nothing about the camera's history. It had been sold to him as part of an estate sale, and he had never used it. Unsatisfied but left with no other leads, Emily had one last idea. She set up the camera in her living room, aimed it at herself, and clicked a series of pictures. Perhaps interacting directly with the entity would provide some answers. That night, she barely slept. Her dreams were plagued by visions of drowning, gasping for air as a dark force pulled her deeper into an abyss. When morning finally came, she rushed to develop the film, her hands trembling as she worked in her makeshift darkroom. The photographs revealed the terrifying truth. Not only was the figure clearer, almost lifelike, but it was also now right beside her in the photos, its eyes filled with what looked like malevolent glee. Worse, Emily's own visage had transformed. She looked tormented, her eyes mirroring the figure's anguish. Frightened and desperate, Emily took drastic measures. She decided to burn the camera, hoping to sever whatever link had been forged between her and the entity. As the flames consumed the vintage Nikon F3, Emily heard one final agonized wail, echoing as if from a great distance. A chill ran down her spine, but when she turned, there was nothing there. Days turned into weeks, and the events surrounding the forgotten camera began to feel like a distant nightmare. Emily tried to move on, focusing on her work and avoiding any mention of what she had experienced. But she couldn't shake off the nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right. One fateful night, reviewing her recent digital photos, Emily froze. There, in the corner of one image, was the figure, its eyes piercing, as if mocking her futile attempts to escape. Now, Emily lives in a state of perpetual fear, haunted by an entity that refuses to be forgotten, bound to her through the lens of a camera she no longer possesses. And so, the terror lingers, captured in the frame of her life, like a forgotten photograph slowly fading but never truly gone.